The transport ship carried all the students back to the main academy building. The journey was quiet. No one spoke much. They were all thinking about what they had seen at the humans' camp. Tarek sat in the corner, his large arms crossed over his chest. He had been so proud of his underground tunnel. He had thought it was impressive. Now he was not so sure. Lyra sat with her hands folded in her lap. She kept looking at Yuna, who sat alone near the window, watching the clouds pass by below. The human girl looked exhausted but peaceful. When they landed, Instructor Vel asked everyone to come to the main lecture hall. There was something he wanted to discuss. The hall filled with students. Not just those who had been on Chorus 7, but others who had heard stories about what happened. Word had spread quickly through the academy. Everyone wanted to know about the human who had built a house in one night. Yuna sat in the back row, just like always. She had washed her hands and changed her clothes, but she still looked tired. Some students kept turning to look at her. Instructor Vel stood at the front of the hall. His 4 eyes moved slowly across the room. Today's assessment taught us many things, he began. Each of you use your natural abilities to survive. The Gorati dug. The Valari built membrane shelters. The Fen used their fur. Everyone did what their species has evolved to do over millions of years. He paused and looked toward Yuna, except one student. The room was completely silent. The human student did not have natural abilities to help her survive. No claws for digging. No special skin for shelter. No fur for warmth. By all logic, she should have struggled the most. Vel walked slowly across the front of the room. Instead, she built the most impressive shelter any of us has ever seen in this assessment. She made fire without technology. She created tools from stones and sticks. She built walls, a roof, and a fireplace. She even planted a garden. Several students made sounds of disbelief. Others nodded slowly. They had seen it with their own eyes. I have been teaching survival studies for 37 years, Vel said. I have seen thousands of students from hundreds of species. I've never seen anything like what I saw this morning. He looked directly at Yuna. I asked her how she did it. Do you know what she said? She said she just built it, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Vel turned back to address the whole room. I want to tell you something about humans. Something that most of us in the galactic community have not understood until now. He pressed a button and a hologram appeared. It showed Earth, the human homeworld. A small blue and green planet. Humans evolved on a planet with dangerous animals, extreme weather, and limited resources. They had no natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no armor. Their bodies are soft and fragile compared to most species in this room. Images flashed across the hologram. Ancient humans on Earth. Primitive tools. Early fires. So, how did they survive? How did they become the dominant species on their planet? The hologram showed humans building shelters, making clothes, creating weapons, farming land. They changed. Not their bodies, their world. When they were cold, they did not grow fur. They made fire and built shelters. When they were hungry, they did not grow stronger claws. They made tools for hunting and farming. When they were in danger, they did not develop natural armor. They made weapons and worked together. Vel let the images continue to play. Every other species in the galaxy has adapted to their environment. Humans adapted their environment to themselves. They see a problem, and they create a solution. They see darkness, and they make light. They see cold, and they make warmth. The hologram faded away. Vel looked around the room. This is what makes humans different. This is what makes them special. They are not the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally protected. but they have something that few other species have developed to the same degree. He held up one finger. They create. The room was silent for a long moment. Tarek slowly raised his hand. Instructor, are you saying that humans are superior? No, Vel said. I am not saying that any species is superior to another. Each species has strengths and weaknesses. What I am saying is that we have underestimated humans. We looked at their lack of natural abilities and assumed they were weak. We were wrong. He turned to look at Yuna again. We were very wrong. Yuna did not seem embarrassed by all the attention. She just listened quietly, her hands resting on her desk. Lyra stood up suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. I laughed at her, Lyra said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Before the assessment, I said she would freeze before midnight. I thought she had no chance. She turned to face Yuna directly. I am sorry. I did not understand. Other students began to speak up. They apologized for their words before the assessment. They admitted they had been wrong about humans. They asked Yuna questions about how she had built her shelter, how she had made her tools, how she had started her fire. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Yuna was surrounded by students who wanted to talk to her, who wanted to learn from her, who respected her. She answered their questions patiently. She explained how to find the right stones for making fire. She described how to test branches for building. She talked about the importance of planning and not giving up. The most important thing, she said, is to not stop. Even when you are tired. Even when it is hard. You keep going because you have to. Because giving up is not an option. An older student, a Fen with golden fur, asked a question that many were thinking. Is this what all humans are like? Or are you special? Yuna thought about this for a moment. Every human is different, she said. Some are good at building. Some are good at thinking. Some are good at leading. But all humans share something. We believe that we can change things. We believe that we can make the world better through our own effort. We never just accept the way things are. The room was quiet as everyone thought about this. Instructor Vel spoke again. Thank you, Yuna. Thank you for showing us something new today. He addressed the whole class one more time. Remember this lesson. Strength comes in many forms. Intelligence comes in many forms. Survival comes in many forms. Never underestimate a species just because they are different from you. You might be surprised by what they can do. The lecture ended. Students began to leave the hall, but many stopped to talk to Yuna. They invited her to eat with them. They asked if she would show them how to make fire with stones. They wanted to be her friend Dot as the hall emptied. Instructor Vel watched from the front of the room. He had taught for many decades. He had seen many things. But today he had learned something new. Humans were not weak. They were not simple. They were not to be underestimated. They were builders, creators, survivors. And now the galaxy was beginning to understand that Yuna walked out of the hall with her new friends. She was still tired, and her hands still hurt. But she was smiling. Her grandmother had always told her that humans were special, that they could do anything if they worked hard enough and never gave up. Today, she had proved her grandmother right. And somewhere, far away on Earth, in a small village in the mountains, an old woman looked up at the stars and smiled. She did not know exactly what her granddaughter had done, but she knew, somehow, that Yuna was making her proud. That was what humans did. They worked hard. They never gave up. And they made the people who loved them proud. The stars were waiting. The galaxy was watching. And humanity was just getting started. Instructor Vel sat in the transport ship as it flew over the forests of Car 7. The morning sun was bright and warm, already melting the frost that covered the ground. It had been a cold night. one of the coldest this region had seen in many seasons. He looked at his datapad, checking the locations of each student. The sensors showed that all of them had survived the night. That was good. The academy had safety measures in place, of course. If any student had been in real danger, a rescue team would have been sent. But no rescues had been needed. Vel started his evaluation rounds. He visited the karate student first. Tarek stood proudly beside his underground shelter. He had dug a hole about 2 meters deep with a small entrance tunnel that kept cold air from flowing in. The inside was simple but functional. Excellent use of natural karate abilities, Vel said, making notes on his pad. The depth is appropriate for temperature regulation. The entrance design shows good thinking. Well done. Tarek smiled widely, showing his large teeth. Thank you, instructor. It was not difficult. Vel nodded and moved on to the next location. Lara's membrane dome was impressive in its own way. It was thin and light, almost invisible in the morning sun. But it had kept her warm all night. The Valari girl looked fresh and rested. Efficient use of biological resources, Vel noted. The dome shape maximizes internal volume while minimizing surface area. Very good. Other students had similar results. The Fen had found a warm spot between large rocks and survived with their thick fur. The Maluxi had entered their sleep state and barely noticed the cold. Everyone had done exactly what their species did best. Then Vel's transport approached the human's location. He expected to find something simple. Maybe a pile of branches leaning against a tree. Maybe a hole in the ground covered with leaves. Maybe nothing at all. He was prepared to give the human girl credit for simply surviving. That alone would be impressive for a species with no natural protection against cold. The transport slowed down. Vel looked out the window. He stopped moving. His 4 eyes widened. For a long moment, he could not speak. What? He whispered. What is that? Below him, in the clearing by the stream, was not a simple shelter. It was not a pile of branches. It was not a hole in the ground. It was a cabin. A real cabin with walls made of woven branches and mud. A roof covered with leaves and clay. A door made of tied sticks. And rising from a hole in the roof, a thin line of smoke. Smoke. That meant fire. Fire inside the shelter. Vel ordered the pilot to land immediately. He jumped out of the transport before it had fully touched the ground. Yuna was standing outside her cabin. She looked tired. Very tired. Her clothes were dirty and torn in several places. Her hands were wrapped in strips of cloth. But she was standing, and she was smiling. Good morning, instructor, she said. Her voice was calm, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Vel walked toward the cabin slowly. He felt like he was dreaming. This could not be real. He looked inside the doorway. The interior of the cabin was warm. A small fire burned in what could only be called a fireplace, built from stones and clay against the back wall. On the walls hung tools. Actual tools. A stone knife. A spear. A hammer. Other things he did not immediately recognize. On a flat stone near the fire, several clay bowls were sitting. Some held water. Some held what looked like edible plants. Vel turned and looked at the area beside the cabin. His hearts, all 3 of them, seemed to stop. There was a garden. A small garden with rows of plants growing in soft, tilled soil. The plants were small, but they were alive. They were growing. How? Vel finally found his voice. How did you do this? Yuna shrugged slightly. I just built it. In 12 hours? In the dark? In the cold? Yes. Vel walked around the cabin. He examined the walls, the roof, the fireplace, the tools. Everything was rough and simple, but everything worked. Everything showed purpose and design. You had no training in survival building, Vel said. It was not a question. Not formal training, Una said. My grandmother told me stories about how humans used to live a long time ago, before we had cities and machines. I listened to her stories. Stories? Vel could not believe what he was hearing. You built all of this from stories? Humans have been building things for a very long time, Una said. We do not have claws or fur or special skin. So we learned to make our own protection. We learned to change the world around us to fit our needs. Vel was silent for a long moment. He had studied many species during his career. He thought he understood what made each one special. But he was realizing now that he had not understood humans at all. The transport ship returned with more passengers. Lyra and Torek and several other students had asked to see the human shelter. They had heard Vel's surprised voice over the communication system. They wanted to know what had happened. When they stepped out of the transport, they stopped and stared. Lyra's purple skin went pale. That's impossible, she said. Torek's mouth hung open. He closed it, then opened it again. She built a house. An actual house. The students walked around Una's camp, touching the walls, looking at the tools, examining the garden. None of them could speak properly. They kept starting sentences and not finishing them. The fireplace, Den said. He had been one of the students who laughed at humans the day before. He was not laughing now. How did you make a fireplace? Stones and clay, Una said simply. The stones hold and reflect the heat. The chimney lets the smoke out. And the fire? Lyra asked. We are not allowed to bring technology. How did you make fire? Una took 2 stones from her pocket. She struck them together. Sparks flew. Fire is not technology, she said. Fire is nature. I just needed to find it. The students stood in silence. They looked at the cabin. They looked at the human girl who had built it. They did not know what to say. Instructor Vel made notes on his datapad. His hands were shaking slightly. Tell me, he said to Una, did you sleep at all last night? Una thought about it. Maybe 30 minutes. I was busy building all of this. Yes, and... She paused. Would anyone like something to eat? I found some roots and berries that are safe. I cooked them this morning. She gestured to the clay bowls near the fire. Inside were cooked vegetables and small pieces of fruit. No one moved. They were too shocked. A picked up one of the bowls and held it out to Lyra. They taste good. I promise. Lyra took the bowl with trembling hands. She looked at the food. She looked at the human girl who had gathered it, prepared it, and cooked it. A girl with no claws, no special skin, no natural weapons. You made all of this, Lyra said slowly. In one night. Una smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. Humans are good at making things, she said. It is what we do. The night was at its coldest now. The air bit at any exposed skin. Frost formed on the leaves and grass. Any creature without protection would suffer greatly on a night like this. Inside her rough shelter, Una sat by the fire. She was tired. Her whole body ached. Her hands were covered in small cuts and bruises. But her eyes were still bright, still thinking, still planning. She looked at the stones she had collected earlier. Some were just for the fire ring, but others had different shapes. Different possibilities. She picked up a flat, wide stone. It was smooth on one side, rough on the other. She picked up a smaller, harder stone. Then she began to work. She hit the edge of the flat stone again and again with the smaller one. Small pieces chipped away. Slowly, very slowly, the flat stone began to change shape. The edge became sharper. The stone became a tool. An hour passed. Then another. Una kept working. When she was done, she held up a stone knife. It was not pretty. It would not win any awards. but it was sharp. It could cut. She tested it on a branch nearby. The stone knife sliced through the wood cleanly. Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. She did not stop there. She found a long, straight stick and a shorter piece of wood. Using her knife, she carved a notch in the end of the long stick. She fitted a sharp stone into the notch and tied it tight with twisted grass. Now she had a spear. She found a Y-shaped branch and a strip of flexible bark. She tied the bark between the two ends of the Y. Now she had a simple slingshot dot. She found a heavy stone with a natural hole through its center. She fitted a wooden handle into the hole and wrapped it tight. Now she had a hammer dot by the time the two moons were at their highest point in the sky. Yuna had 6 different tools hanging on the inside wall of her shelter. Each one was rough and simple. Each one was made from things she found in the forest. Each one worked. The tools were not enough. Yuna left her shelter and walked to the edge of the clearing. The cold hit her immediately. She wrapped her arms around herself, but kept walking. She moved along the tree line, looking at the ground, searching for something. She found it near a large tree. Small plants with thick green leaves. She recognized them from her studies. They were not the same as earth plants, but they were similar enough. Edible roots. Useful leaves. She dug carefully around the plants with her stone knife. She did not pull them up. Instead, she took small sections, making sure to leave the roots alive in the ground. Then she carried the pieces back to her shelter. Near the stream, she found clay. Thick red-brown clay that stuck to her fingers. She gathered as much as she could carry and brought it back to her fire. She mixed the clay with water from the stream. She shaped it into small bowls. She placed them near the fire to dry. By morning, she would have containers for water and food. Then she turned to the area beside her shelter. Using a flat stone as a digging tool, she began to break up the ground. The frozen earth was hard at first, but the work warmed her body. She dug and turned the soil until it was soft and loose. She made rows in the soft earth. She planted the small pieces of plants she had collected. She carried water from the stream in her cupped hands and watered each one carefully. It was a tiny garden. Just a few plants in a small patch of dirt. But it was a garden. On a strange planet, in the middle of the night, a human had planted a garden. The work never stopped. Yuna noticed that her shelter, while it blocked the wind, did not hold heat well. The fire in front of the entrance helped, but most of the warmth escaped into the night. She thought about this problem. Then she went back to the stream and gathered more clay. She gathered more stones. She worked for another hour, building a structure of stones and clay against the back wall of her shelter. A fireplace. An actual fireplace with walls to reflect heat and a chimney hole to let smoke escape. She moved her fire inside, carefully, piece by piece. Soon, flames were dancing in her new fireplace. The heat bounced off the stone walls and filled the small shelter. For the first time, the inside of her rough little home was truly warm. Outside, the forest was silent and frozen. The temperature had dropped even lower. Any exposed water had turned to ice. Any creature without protection would be in serious danger. Yuna sat inside her warm shelter, by her fireplace, surrounded by her handmade tools. She was exhausted. Her body screamed for rest. But there was something like joy in her heart. She had done this. With nothing but her mind and her hands, she had created all of this. She thought about the other students. By now, they were probably sleeping comfortably. The Gorati in their tunnels. The Valari in their membrane domes. The Fen wrapped in their fur. They were all using what nature had given them. But nature had given humans something different. Not strength. Not speed. Not claws or fur or special skin. Nature had given humans the ability to look at the world and imagine it being different. and then make it different. Yun allowed herself to rest for a little while. She leaned against the wall of her shelter, feeling the warmth of her fire, listening to the sounds of the night. Her eyes grew heavy, but she did not sleep long. There were still hours before dawn. There was still work to do. She woke herself up and looked around at what she had built. It was good. It was more than good. But it could be better. She went back outside, back into the cold, back into the forest. She gathered more materials. She improved her shelter, making the walls thicker, the roof stronger. She built a small platform near the fire where she could keep things dry. She made a simple door from woven branches. As the sky began to lighten in the east, Yuna stood outside her shelter and looked at what she had created. A small cabin with walls and a roof. A fireplace with smoke rising from it. Tools hanging inside. Clay bowls drying by the fire. A tiny garden with small green plants already beginning to stand up in the soft soil. In 12 hours. With nothing but what she found in the forest and what she carried in her mind, she had built this. She was tired. More tired than she had ever been in her life. Her hands were raw and bleeding. Her muscles ached. But she was not cold. She was not hungry. She was not afraid. She was ready. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of a transport ship. The instructors were coming. Morning had arrived. It was time to show them what a human could do. The transport ship flew low over the forests of Kara 7. The sun was already touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Soon it would be dark. Soon the cold would come. One by one, students were dropped at different locations across the planet. Each landing zone was at least 5 kilometers from the next. There would be no help. There would be no teamwork. Each student was alone. Yuna felt the transport slow down. A door opened in the floor, and warm air rushed out into the cold evening. Below her was a clearing in the forest. Trees surrounded it on all sides. A small stream ran along the eastern edge. "Good luck, human," the pilot said. He was a large Moluxi with thick gray fur. His voice was not unkind, but there was doubt in his yellow eyes. Yuna nodded and jumped down. Her feet hit the soft ground. The transport rose and disappeared into the darkening sky. She stood still for a moment. She closed her eyes. She listened. The forest was alive with sounds. Birds calling to each other before night came. Small animals moving through the bushes. Water flowing in the stream. Wind moving through the leaves. Yuna opened her eyes. She did not panic. She did not cry. She simply looked around and began to think. 5 kilometers away, Tarek was already digging. His powerful claws tore through the dirt with easy speed. In less than 30 minutes, he had made a hole deep enough to stand in. In another hour, he would have a comfortable underground room where the cold could not reach him. Too easy, he said to himself, throwing dirt over his shoulder. This assessment is for children. 8 kilometers in another direction, Lyra stood in the center of her clearing. She raised her thin arms and closed her eyes. Slowly, a clear substance began to flow from her skin. It was the membrane that all Valari could produce. She shaped it with her hands, pulling and stretching it until it formed a dome around her body. The membrane was thin but strong. It would keep out wind and rain. It would hold in her body heat. By the time the stars came out, Lara was sitting comfortably inside her dome, waiting for morning. "Humans," she said softly to herself, shaking her head. "I wonder if she is still alive." Other students across the planet were using their own special abilities. The Garati dug. The Valari built membrane shelters. The Fen wrapped themselves in their thick fur and found warm spots between rocks. The Moluxi entered their sleep state, their bodies becoming cold-resistant. Everyone had a way. Everyone had an answer that their species had developed over millions of years. and on the other side of the forest, Yuna was walking among the trees. She was not running. She was not hiding. She was collecting things. First, she found stones. Not just any stones. She picked them up, looked at them carefully, felt their weight and shape. Some she kept. Most she threw away. She was looking for something specific. Then she found it. A dark gray stone with a sharp edge. When she struck it against another stone, sparks flew. Yuna smiled. She put this stone in her pocket. Next, she found branches. Again, she was careful. She tested each one. She bent them to check if they would break. She looked at how thick they were, how long, how straight. She chose branches of different sizes for different purposes. As she worked, the sun disappeared completely. Darkness covered the forest. The temperature began to drop. Yuna's breath made small clouds in the cold air. She did not stop. She found a spot near the stream, where the ground was high and dry. She cleared away leaves and small plants. Then she began to dig with her hands. Her fingers hurt. The ground was cold and hard. But she kept digging, making a shallow pit in the earth. While she dug, she thought about her grandmother. Back on Earth, in a small village in the mountains, her grandmother had told her stories. Stories about the old times, before cities and technology. Stories about how humans had survived when they had nothing but their hands and their minds. Humans are not strong, her grandmother had said. We are not fast. We cannot fly. We cannot breathe underwater. But we have something else. We can think. We can plan. We can make things. And most important, we never give up. Yuna remembered those words as she worked in the dark. She arranged stones in a circle inside the pit she had dug. Then she gathered dry leaves, small twigs, and thin strips of bark. She placed them carefully in the center of the stone circle. She took out her 2 stones. She struck them together. Once, twice, 3 times. Sparks jumped onto the dry leaves. A tiny flame appeared. Yuna leaned down and blew gently. The flame grew. The fire caught. Light and warmth spread through the clearing. Yuna sat back and watched the flames dance. For the first time since she landed on this planet, she felt warm. But she did not rest for long. She had a fire. Now she needed a shelter. She went back into the forest. In the firelight that reached just past the edge of the clearing, she found young trees with thin, flexible trunks. She pushed and pulled until they bent toward each other, crossing at the top. She tied them together using long grass that she twisted into rope. It was slow work. Hard work. Her hands were bleeding now. The cold made her fingers stiff and clumsy. But she did not stop. As the night grew darker and colder, Yuna kept working. She wove smaller branches between the larger ones. She filled the gaps with leaves and mud from near the stream. She made walls. She made a roof. Far away, Torek was sleeping peacefully in his underground hole. Lyra was dreaming inside her membrane dome. The Fen and the Maluxi and all the others were comfortable and warm, using the gifts that nature had given their species. None of them knew what was happening in Yuna's clearing. None of them knew that the human girl was not sleeping. She was not hiding. She was not giving up. She was building. Midnight came and went. Yuna's fire burned low. She added more wood and kept working. The stars moved slowly across the sky. The 2 moons rose and set. And still, Yuna worked. Her shelter grew. It was not beautiful. It was rough and uneven. But it was strong. She tested it by pushing against the walls. They held. She tested the roof by throwing handfuls of water at it. The water ran off without leaking through. She had done what no one expected a human to do. She had made something from nothing. She had turned a dark, cold clearing into a place where she could survive. But Yuna was not finished. She looked at the shelter, at the fire, at the stream nearby. and she thought about what else she could do. Before the sun came up, she still had hours of darkness ahead of her. She was not going to waste them. The morning sun of 3 different colors came through the tall windows of the Galactic Academy. Students from 12 different planets sat in the large classroom. Some had blue skin. Some had scales. Some had more than 2 arms. And in the back row, sitting alone at a small desk, was Yuna. Yuna was human. She was the only human in this class. She was also the only human in the entire academy this year. Her black hair was tied back in a simple knot. Her brown eyes watched everything carefully. She did not speak much. The other students did not speak to her much either. Instructor Vel walked into the room. Vel was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond shape on his face. He taught survival studies. It was a required class for all first-year students at the academy. "Good morning," Vel said. His voice was calm and deep. "Today I will tell you about your next assessment." The room became quiet. Assessments at the Galactic Academy were never easy. They were designed to test students in real situations, not just with questions on paper. Vel touched a panel on the wall. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a planet covered in forests and mountains. 2 small moons orbited around it. "This is Cora 7, Vel said. "It is a Class 3 wilderness planet. The air is safe to breathe. The water is safe to drink. The temperature at night drops to near freezing. There are no dangerous animals, but the environment itself can be deadly if you are not prepared." A student in the front row raised one of his 4 arms. His name was Torek, and he was from the Gorati species. The Gorati were known for their strength and their ability to dig through almost any ground. "What is the assessment?" Torek asked. "Simple," Vel said. "You will be dropped on Cora 7 at sunset. You will have 12 hours. By sunrise, you must have built a shelter that can protect you from the elements. No technology, no tools, only what you find on the planet and what you carry in your mind." Whispers spread through the classroom. Some students looked worried. Others looked excited. A female student named Lara spoke without raising her hand. She was Valari, a species with pale purple skin and large dark eyes. The Valari were known for being intelligent and quick. "No technology at all?" Lyra asked. "Not even basic scanning equipment?" "Nothing," Vel confirmed. "This assessment tests your natural survival abilities. Every species in this room has evolved different ways to survive. This is your chance to show what your species can do." Lyra smiled. She looked confident. The Valari could create thin membrane shelters using a substance their bodies produce naturally. It was like a second skin that could protect them from cold and rain. Torek also looked pleased. The Gorati could dig underground homes in less than an hour with their powerful claws. Underground, they would be safe from cold winds and temperature drops. Other students began talking among themselves. The Moluxi could enter a sleep state that made them almost immune to cold. The Fen had thick fur that kept them warm in any condition. The Scally could climb trees and build nests high above the ground. Everyone seemed to have a plan. Everyone seemed to have a natural advantage. Everyone except Yuna. A Valari student sitting near Lyra turned to look at Yuna. His name was Den, and he had been in several classes with the human girl. He had never seen her do anything special. "What about the human?" Den asked loudly. He did not ask Yuna directly. He asked the room, as if she was not there. "Humans have no claws, no protective skin, no fur, no special abilities. How will she survive?" Several students laughed. It was not mean laughter, exactly. It was more like the sound people make when they see something strange and do not understand it. Yuna did not react. Her face stayed calm. She just watched and listened. Instructor Vel looked at Una for a moment. His 4 eyes seemed curious. Humans are new to the galactic community, Vel said slowly. They have only been traveling between stars for less than 200 years. We do not know much about their survival capabilities. This assessment will be interesting for all of us. Interesting? Lyra said with a small laugh. She will freeze before midnight. Humans are soft. Everyone knows this. I heard humans cannot even see in the dark, another student added. They have no natural weapons, Torek said. No claws, no venom, no armor. Their teeth are flat. Their nails are weak. How did they even become the dominant species on their planet? Una still said nothing. She just sat there, her hands folded on her desk, her eyes moving slowly around the room. Instructor Vel raised one hand to quiet the class. Enough, he said. We will see what each of you can do tomorrow. The assessment begins at sunset. You will be transported to different locations on Core 7. Each of you will be alone. Each of you will have the same 12 hours. At sunrise, I will come to evaluate your shelters. He paused and looked around the room. This assessment is worth 30% of your grade. But more importantly, it will show you something about yourselves. Survival is not just about strength or special abilities. Sometimes it is about something else entirely. The class ended. Students began to leave, talking excitedly about their plans. Torek was already describing how deep his tunnel would be. Lyra was explaining the best shape for a Valari membrane dome. Others were making bets on who would build the best shelter. Nobody asked Una about her plans. Nobody invited her to walk with them. She gathered her things slowly and left the classroom alone. In the hallway, Den caught up with her. He walked beside her for a few steps, looking at her with what might have been curiosity or pity. You know, he said, there is no shame in asking for help. Maybe you could partner with someone. I am sure Instructor Vel would understand. Humans are... Well, you are new to all this. Una looked at him. For the first time, there was a small smile on her face. It was not a nervous smile or a grateful smile. It was something else. Something that Den could not quite understand. Thank you, Una said. Her voice was soft and calm. But I think I will be fine. Den watched her walk away. He shook his head slowly. The poor human had no idea what she was getting into. Cora 7 was cold and dark and unforgiving. Without claws or fur or special skin, she would be lucky to survive the night. He almost felt sorry for her. Almost.